Well. It turns out perhaps maybe the best bed mount you can get for your 3D printer isn't even a mount at all. Let's go talk about that. So, one of my viewers a number of months back left a comment on the videos that I've made about testing out different sorts of bed mounts, like these springs, these silicone mounts, and these metal mounts, that maybe I should try this out. And this is more or less the methodology I understood from this particular individual. And I gotta say, the results so far are pretty promising. So let's talk about what exactly we're looking at. So, here's the setup. You've got your hot plate. On the hot plate, there's a screw that protrudes through and goes all the way down. Now, on the bottom end of this hot plate, we start with a washer. That's going to help evenly distribute the load from a nut when we try to keep the screw in place. So, by putting a single nut, so this very top nut, on the washer and getting it as hand tight as we can, that's going to keep this screw taut. It's going to keep it straight down. It's not going to move. But the printer bed moves back and forth, and those vibrations could cause this first nut to wiggle itself out of position and then become loose. And if that happens, then the whole bed will start to wiggle from that position, and it can happen on any or all of them that are set up like this. So we have a second nut butted up against the first one, and what that's going to do, more or less, I won't really go into the physics behind it, but some of you who work on cars may know about this trick, is when you put two nuts tightly together like this, putting the first nut, torquing it down onto the second nut, they basically lock each other in place. So that way it doesn't move. So now you've got this system where the bolt coming out of your hot plate is secure, and the system that's securing it won't become undone due to vibrations. Now that's really cool. But what about down here? We still need a way to adjust the level on the bed. Well, that's the great part, is we're basically leveraging the same sort of methodology for that purpose. Now, what we have here is called a wing nut, and this is going to sit on the top of our y-axis gantry, and on the bottom of our y-axis gantry, we're just reusing our adjustment knobs that came with an Ender 3. But this adjustment knob can also just be a wing nut if you want it to be. So let me show you how this works. If I wanted to do something like lower the bed, I could just twist this, and I'm going to make this kind of extreme to illustrate a point. So I move this wing nut up, and then I spin the adjustment knob down, and hey, look at that. The bed on this corner just went down. If I want to move the bed up, I just do the opposite. I take the adjustment knob down here, and I screw it down, and then I take this wing nut and torque that down. And by torquing the wing nut down onto this adjustment knob, or torquing down the adjustment knob onto the wing nut, by doing that, you have done the same thing that we've accomplished up here. And basically, that force of the tension between these two mechanisms on the same screw is keeping them in place, and it's very hard to wriggle them out of place. So what we have is more or less a completely solid bed mount that is fully adjustable. It can be complete metal. Like I said, if you want to get rid of this plastic wheel with the brass insert, you can just use another wing nut. And that is, technically speaking, a full metal bed mount system. But unlike our previous full metal bed mount system, it's not just an aluminum block. It's something that can be adjusted. It's not a chunk of metal and then adjusted with shims, because as we went over in a previous video, that has a lot of problems in its own right. But this is just as secure. Like, these things really just aren't going anywhere, man. And they don't really cause any binding issues either. When you do something like use solid aluminum bed mounts, you have a tendency of causing the bed to kind of bow from the center outwards down, which is not good. You can destroy your hot plate like that. But this appears to work beautifully. And the methodology is well known. It's just, I haven't seen anyone do this before. But I gotta say, it looks very, very promising. So, for literally maybe $5 or less at your local hardware store, you can get pretty much everything you need. The bolt that comes out, or the screw that comes out of your hotbed, is an M4 by 0.7 by, I forget how many millimeters, but M4 by 0.7 is the diameter and thread pitch. So you just get a washer, 2 nuts, a wing nut, and if you want to reuse this, or another wing nut, doesn't matter. The system's all the same. Well, you might have a hard time finding it at your local hardware store in the quantities you would need. I actually had to go to 2 different hardware stores to get enough, because this is a metric size, and here in the United States they're not as common, but it's definitely doable. So I'd recommend going to like Ace Hardware. They're typically pretty good with specialized sizes and oddball fasteners, but this seems to be doing great.